I'm going to talk about the theme of colonialism. And so that would be the focus for us in this video. Now, colonialism refers to the ideological structure that justifies colonization. And Crusoe is an emblem of British colonialism. That is to say, through Crusoe's character, we find a strong justification of colonization of the non-European world by the Europeans. Now, colonization refers to the process in which people from a particular country go away from their country and then settle down in another country, and then they try to get the resources from that foreign country. They exploit the natives in terms of seeking labor, in terms of seizing their lands, and then they bring the resources that they have got from those natives to their own country. And the very system which develops where one country gets exploited by another in this way continuously, in a systematic manner, in an organized way, is called colonization. Gradually, the material resources of the country which is under colonization gets exploited and used only by the colonizers who have come from a different country and colonized them. And this entire exploitation is not only economic but cultural in nature, as in the colonized people feel inferior in several ways in comparison with the colonizers. The culture of the colonizer appears to be superior. The race of the colonizer appears to be superior to the people who have been colonized. The colonizer continuously projects himself as a superior being, a being who is more rational, who is more male, quote unquote, in nature, quote unquote, male in nature, more rational in nature, more powerful in nature. And the colonizer also projects himself as a person who belongs to a superior culture. And in this way, the colonizer justifies his colonization. He imprints upon the mind of the colonized the myth that since you are inferior to us in several ways, you should abide by the rules that we assign, that we make. You should follow us. you should be exploited by us, and in this way you would be emancipated by us from darkness, from irrationality. And that is precisely what the European voyagers, the European sailors, the tradesmen who went to the distant parts of the non-European world did. They represented themselves as superior beings. As in the previous videos you have noticed that I was mentioning the way in which the Africans get portrayed in Robinson Crusoe, and that portrayal is very, very derogatory in nature. The Africans appear to be savages, they appear to be animals. Now, why is there this kind of portrayal? If Africans are portrayed as animals, as inferior beings to the Europeans, then definitely Europeans can project themselves as superior beings, and hence they can justify their rule over them. Right? So in this way the Europeans can justify colonization, justify the economic and cultural exploitation that they undertake in African lands and above and over African people. The white man's burden is a reference to that kind of myth which gets created through colonialism, the ideology, which is very, very strong in nature. Right, and that causes colonization to continue. Many people say that even after the actual physical colonization stops, colonialism continues. For instance, even after the people of the colonizing country have left the colonized country, the hitherto colonized people would always feel inferior. They would always try to be like their erstwhile masters, erstwhile colonizers, even when they are not ruling over them. And that is why the so-called decolonization, which happened in several parts of the world when the empire, the British Empire, collapsed in the mid 20th century, 1950s, 1960s. If you think of India, it is 1947. If you think of, say, any African country like Kenya, it is 1963. So 1940s, 50s, 60s, that was the time when there was this crumbling of European and especially British colonization. So even after that, even when the British were no more in India, Indians believed that British were better than them. British were people to be emulated, people whom we should follow, we should imitate. So in this way we can say that colonialism is a very powerful force which still stays even after colonization is over. Right? And there are several sorts of colonization. One is physical colonization, another is cultural colonization, where you think that you belong to the inferior culture. Your literature is inferior, your taste is inferior, your clothes are inferior, everything is inferior to the erstwhile colonizer. Now, this is what we need to understand when we are reading Robinson Crusoe, because Crusoe is an emblem of British/European colonialism. The novel, as you see, got published in 1719, coincided with the increasing European sea voyages, having the motive of settling to the non-European lands. And with the power of his gun and the symbolic capital that Crusoe collects from the deserted ship, Crusoe physically conquers an alien territory, abolishes most of the natives, and enslaves one of them, whom he names Friday. Right, so if you look at Crusoe's narrative from this perspective, you would find how the narrative is underpinned by a very, very deep rooted colonial ideology. The way in which Crusoe refashions himself and shapes the island is indicative of the deep rooted colonial ideology that propelled the mercantile pursuits of the middle class, European/British of the time. So the British found trade routes, Europe expanded its horizons, they sent ships to several places. In fact, British were great shipbuilders, so they were taking the lead in this pursuit. They were finding trading routes to several parts of Asia and Africa. In the beginning with the 16th century, late 16th century, and early 17th century, and by the late 17th century, when we find the historical context of Robinson Crusoe, where we locate the formation of the text, the mercantile pursuits of the middle class Europeans or British sailors were actually colonial pursuits. So they were occupying new lands, they were occupying new places, discovering new places, they were colonizing the natives, they were creating plantations over there, and then collecting revenue, generating revenue in those so-called colonies. And they were the colonies of the European countries. So Robinson Crusoe builds a British colony in the island where he finds himself marooned for a long, long time. And instead of shrinking in terror, Crusoe imagines himself as the monarch of the island. Right? And he not only establishes physical control but also cultural and psychological dominance. For instance, by naming Friday and by Christianizing Friday, Crusoe assumes possession of him. And I quote, this is in my book, which is the Norton Critical Edition of Robinson Crusoe, published in 1994. Crusoe says, "I made it my business to teach him everything that was proper to make him useful, handy, helpful, but specifically to make him speak and understand when I spoke." So this is a completely dehumanizing pursuit, where Crusoe is the master who is taming Friday the savage. In fact, he never cares to know the name of Friday. He names Friday in a very, very flimsy way. Why did he name the native Friday? Because he found him on a Friday. Right? And many a time in today's world, we use this phrase in conversations, in casual conversations, that when we refer to a person who serves us as a servant, so we say that he is my man Friday. Now that is extremely derogatory in nature, because not only derogatory to the fictional man who is Friday, whose actual name we do not know, and Robinson Crusoe never cares to let us know, and also to the person whom we call our man Friday. Right. And then Crusoe's narrative, if you look at it closely, has a clear colonial underpinning. In fact, there are multiple colonial underpinnings. As you know, colonization was primarily propelled by mercantile philosophy that was gaining prominence with the rise of the middle class, as England was becoming a society where middle class were gradually gaining their power. It required more prosperity for the middle class to gain more wealth and in turn gain more power. So that's why trade routes were being discovered. And this time the middle class was bringing a lot of wealth to England when they were coming back from the colonies. And colonization happens not only at the physical level, but it also happens at the level of culture and psychology. Hence, language becomes an important tool. So Friday learns a new language from Crusoe, and that is also a part and parcel of colonization. Right? Crusoe's sea voyage is motivated by mercantile philosophy of making profit, and so was all types of colonization which had happened so far. In the same way, when Crusoe gives Friday language, he is playing the role of the colonizer. And colonialism is bolstered by myths of Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism, where Europe becomes the center of everything. You already know about anthropocentrism, right? Anthropocentrism was prevalent in the Renaissance. But you must be also aware of Eurocentrism, where Europe is considered to be the center of the world. And whatever Europe does, it is believed in that myth of Eurocentrism that the world would follow. The rest of the world would follow. So Crusoe's depiction of the island and the native population clearly present to us his Eurocentric mindset. He's always thinking in terms of being at the center. Defoe places Crusoe at the center of the entire imaginative horizon of the novel. And the story is told from Crusoe's perspective. We do not ever get the perspective of Friday. And hence what Friday actually thought or could have thought, we do not know. We do not care to know even when we read Crusoe's narrative. And colonization was often propagated as a civilizing mission, as I told you about the white man's burden. That the white man, the colonizer, would think that it's his burden, it's his onus to educate the brown men or the black men, right? Because they are inferior. So Crusoe's interaction with Friday is imbued with this rhetoric of reform. He is not only giving Friday a name, he's not only teaching Friday, but he's reforming him, right? By Christianizing him. He makes Friday believe that his God is inferior. And hence Friday gets Christianized because Crusoe's God is more powerful than Friday's God, according to Crusoe. And this is justified by Defoe, right? And Crusoe's authoritative alterations in Friday's food habit and clothing and religion are all hallmarks of colonial ideology or colonialism. So these are the things that you have to keep in mind while reading the novel. Apparently it's an adventure story in several abridged forms. You will find in the shelves of school children a copy of Robinson Crusoe, and that would be the abridged version. And Robinson Crusoe is familiar to us when we are small kids. Why? Because it's a great adventure story. It is considered to be a nice romantic adventure story which causes a lot of thrill, and it interests us, it fascinates us. A man goes away and then gets shipwrecked and then finds himself isolated, abandoned in an island, marooned in an island for a long time, and then comes back with wealth and prosperity, and by dint of his hard work he achieves material success. So it's a fascinating story, right? Where Crusoe, the man, the hero, starts from a scratch and becomes very rich at the end of the novel, at the end of the story. But underneath this glorious story of adventure, there is a very sinister colonial ideology where exploitation, dominance, and the myth of cultural superiority of Europe in general and of Britain in particular gets justified. Right? So, when you are talking about the theme of colonialism, as appears in the novel, you have to discuss Crusoe's character in this fashion. Okay then, so I would come up with another issue in my next video which is related to the novel. So I hope you would be able to answer any question which is related to colonization or the theme of colonialism vis-a-vis Robinson Crusoe. Thank you for watching.